We did take certain substances, but never to a great extent at the sessions. We took a little, but whenever we'd overdid our intake, the music we made was absolutely shit. We'd go home real happy with the tape, and we'd play it when we got home, and you'd play it the next day, and it was just every time we'd come back to record again, we'd all look at each other and say, well, we have to do that again, because, it didn't work. It didn't work for the Beatles to be too deranged when making music.
I just like to, smoke a joint every now and then.
Good people don't smoke marijuana.
You dick!
Welcome to Vote Pro Podcast, brought to you by VoteProPot.com.
Hello again, everyone. You're listening to episode 7 of Vote Pro Podcast. Today's episode is cannabis and music, one of our absolute favorite subjects. Andrew, Jay, and I are all working or formerly working musicians, and we've performed together going back many, many years. And we know all too well the relationship or even the reputation that musicians have, particularly modern musicians have, with regard to the use of cannabis and other substances. But in this episode, we're going to explore that and the role and influence of cannabis on modern music in America, the musicians who are making it and the people who listen to it, as well as how that has impacted our culture and our politics, which it very much has. But before we begin, we're pushing for some big changes, and we need your help. Please visit us at our website at VoteProPot.com, where you can hear all our episodes and leave comments. And when you're there, click on the contact button and fill in your email and give us your thoughts and your comments. We really want to hear from you.
Or if you'd prefer, you can send us an email directly at VoteProPot@gmail.com.
Or you can like and follow us on Facebook at Facebook.com/VoteProPot.
There's something we'd like to get off our chest and really bring to your attention. And for that, I'm going to throw this over to Jay. Jay?
This just came to our attention, and it's something that we noticed. Obviously, we have a Facebook page, Facebook.com/VoteProPot. And we've tried to boost a couple of our episode announcements or posts, and we've been rejected. So I did a little research today, and I found this really interesting article on change.org by the National Cannabis Industry Association, which is probably the largest business association for cannabis industry. They've got a petition online, which we would like you all to go and sign, because it's come to their attention that Facebook is blacklisting marijuana and cannabis-related pages and ads. They've got a great letter on their website. That's National Cannabis Industry Association, NCIA. Or like I said, change.org has the petition. Just to read one of the paragraphs, it's a long letter. As the nation's largest cannabis industry trade group, the National Cannabis Industry Association has received numerous reports from our members about their advertising being rejected, or even worse, their pages being suspended, despite the fact that they are in compliance with state laws. So this is really important, because organizations like us are trying to get the word out. We're trying to change laws. We're trying to change minds. We're trying to change politicians' minds. And Facebook is blocking us from doing that. Or like I said, we couldn't figure out why. Phil, right? You had that issue, right, Phil?
I did.
What happened exactly?
Well, just as you said, I tried to boost a post and they rejected it and put me through a whole rigmarole of how I had to correct that, and then still rejected it. So there it is. It's out there. It's we think it's not right. And so we thought you should know about it.
Please go sign the petition. I'll put a link in the show description to take you to the exact location on the change.org website.
So, regarding cannabis and music, there's so much to talk about and only a short time to do it. But we want to talk about some of the broader aspects of how cannabis influences the musicians who produce the music and the people who listen to it, and touch on how that's impacted our politics. So, I want to begin with Andrew. Andrew, give me just your brief overview of your experience or how you've come to understand the role that cannabis has played in music.
Well, it just so happens I wrote a paper in college about the evolution of jazz. Jazz started in New Orleans. Cannabis was popular with these jazz musicians, and as jazz spread up the Mississippi, eventually landing in Chicago, and then it just mushroomed across the country. And along with this jazz music came the use of marijuana. And jazz musicians were predominantly like the people who mainly smoked cannabis.
Why is that?
Some people think that cannabis opens up your senses and makes you appreciate or experience things a little differently, and it can affect the way an artist expresses themselves.
So we're talking about like the early New Orleans jazz people, like W.C. Handy, or who's in Memphis and who was famous in Memphis, some of the Tin Pan Alley jazz musicians,
Louis Armstrong,
yeah. All the way up to guys like Monk and Coltrane and those folks. Is that right?
Snoop Dogg.
Yeah.
Even they have to Snoop Dogg.
Well,
I wouldn't call it jazz, but okay.
I think cannabis use is not just popular among musicians. I think it's popular amongst many different types of artists
and people who listen to music.
Absolutely. But I think there's something about cannabis use and the creative process that there's something there. I mean, I can't legitimately explain it.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because people have been trying to explain that, and there has been some research done about it. For example, a professor of music, health, and the brain at Anglia Ruskin University in the UK, a fellow named George Faulkner, did a good amount of research into this and came up with some theories about why cannabis makes music sound better. In 2002, he conducted a study investigating this link using music perception and changes in brainwave activity, and came up with a theory about it's. He says one of the interpretations that I had from this data is that when it comes to attention, subjects were focusing a bit more on the sound, and that this attention also requires less mental energy. So it's easier to listen, to focus, and to relax. Speaking about one of the effects of cannabis on the music listener. And, every musician is also a listener of music, obviously. And there was a lot of research done about how it affects our perception of time, and how, a musician is able to think more deeply into the intervals between beats and perceive them a little bit more, almost like time slows down for them.
Yeah, I read about Louis Armstrong. He said that's why it was so popular. One of the reasons it was so popular among jazz musicians, especially in New Orleans in the early 20th century, is he said he felt like when he was playing, when he got high, he could put more notes that had a bigger impact on the music when he was high, which was interesting. And a lot of that stemmed into the Prohibition thing with Anslinger, who was the biggest prohibitionist probably. He was a big classical music guy, and he hated jazz, and he hated jazz music. And
now tell us again who Anslinger is.
Anslinger was the head of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics.
He was the first leader of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics. Yes.
And he actually had files and spied on all these jazz musicians. And in a book that I was reading some excerpts from, he was spying on everyone from Dizzy Gillespie and Thelonious Monk and Count Basie, Jimmy Dorsey, Duke Ellington, Lionel Hampton. He absolutely hated it. And really, he came up, we talked about this in an earlier episode in history, so we won't spend a lot of time on it. But it's kind of how that whole culture of illegality with marijuana came into being. Was a lot of it had to do with jazz music, believe it or not.
As far as cannabis and the musician, I think that study said how the perception of time sort of slowed a little. And what that does is when you're playing music, it gives you more opportunity to think of the melodic and the rhythmic lines on the music. It So it really makes you better at improvisation.
Right. Yeah, no, it's true. Well, I'd like to talk about my use as a musician. And I'm more of a kind of singer-songwriter guy, although I'm a guitar player too. But, you know, I never really got high while I was performing. I wasn't able to do that because I wasn't comfortable with it. And also, I don't typically get high when I'm writing songs. I will write a song, and when I get it to a point where it's 90% done or 95% done, then I might get high and finish it. And, you know, it's great. You know, I love what I do at that point. But I guess everybody's different. What about you, Phil? What are your experiences with writing and playing?
Well, honestly, my experience with it ended a long time ago. So I don't have any fresh memories to draw on about it. But I do recall that the ability to kind of relax one's mind and open up to the specifics of a piece of music, and especially with regard to jazz improvisation and rock and roll improvisation, because I'm essentially, I play jazz music, but I'm essentially a rock and roller at heart, and it's the same process where you're able to explore and expand and experiment just because your mind is open to that and focused on that. But again, we're talking about 30 years ago or more, so it's something that's not fresh in my memory.
What about you, Andrew?
When I performed, I would sometimes like I played in some bands where we do a celebratory shot before we went on.
Yeah,
but
that's different. I do that.
Right, but it sort of took the edge off. But I could see like a microdose, like a little puff before I went on to relax and get on thing. But if I was like stoned and I was playing live,
you'd zone out.
I would get into it, but sometimes I would get into it so much I would lose my space. I would come on, verse, chorus, dude. Come on.
You'd miss your cue.
So I found I just didn't do it. And in the recording studio, absolutely not.
Wrong song.
You could not be stoned in the studio, man.
No,
well, because you go hours and hours in the studio sometimes, and you lose your edge.
And then you know what it is too? I find as a singer, man, I can't sing stoned. I can't concentrate, and that's the difference. If I'm jamming with a bunch of guys and we're just running chord changes and playing vamps and stuff, yeah, that's totally different, man. I'll get tuned up. That makes it a lot of fun. But no, if I'm performing and I've got to sing and I've got to direct and I've got to be the front guy, I can't do it, man. I can't do it. But to each his own.
So an interesting angle on this is how the kind of marriage of cannabis and music and arts at large has impacted popular culture and the political environment. What are your thoughts on that, Andrew?
Well, it started off with Harry Anslinger targeting and vilifying the jazz musicians. And then Nixon targeted and vilified the hippies and the rock and rollers. Right. And now, to a certain extent, people vilify people like Snoop Dogg because of his cannabis use. Bob Marley was vilified.
Yeah, but don't you feel the stereotype, I think, is kind of going away? Because there was definitely a stereotype, in the 70s and
the
80s.
stoner stereotype.
The stoner stereotype.
I think a lot of the young people feel that way. They go, he smokes pot, big deal. I don't care. It's that guy drinks, that guy smokes.
Right,
who cares?
Right.
It's the older people that still carry that stigma around. And we were brought up in it. Even though we disagree with it, we still feel it. I remember the first time when I was in Colorado and I indulged in some cannabis use with a chef friend of mine out there, I realized, wait a minute, this is the first time in my life I'm actually legally smoking. And it was kind of moving. Kind of checked me up a little bit.
Yeah, that's got to be weird. I haven't done that. Yeah, I bet. I'm serious.
I feel like I was evil. I was made to feel like I was a criminal and a horrible person.
Yeah,
because I enjoyed cannabis occasionally, and it made me feel better. And now we learned it has medicinal value, and it lowers anxiety.
If not a horrible person, you're an idiot. You're Spicoli or a Cheech and Chong. And that's just not true, man. I think a lot of people are coming around to that now.
Well, I hope so.
There's some brilliant people that have smoked pot, and not only that's another thing about cannabis influence in music. But what about sports? I mean, there's been some. I mean,
you test positive for cannabis and you're done.
Right.
And really talented players.
And in the meantime, the greatest Olympic swimmer of all time, Michael Phelps, was seen doing
maybe the greatest Olympic athlete of all time.
And could you imagine with his lung capacity how big a bong hit he could do?
Oh my Lord.
It's
like, I don't want to get stoned with him. He's going to smoke all your weed in 2 hits.
Yeah, I don't follow soccer, but at the World Cup thing, did you hear that they allowed CBD It was no longer a banned
All right,
substance.
so progress.
Which I thought was pretty fascinating. Yeah, that was, of course, that was a couple of months ago.
They'll deal with chronic pain with no hangover, whereas opiates, you take opiates, the next day you're going to be groggy.
Really? Yep.
Yeah, and not only that, I just think that the stigma attached to people who have ruined a perfectly promising athletic or sports career simply by the fact that they tested positive once or more than once. It's just it's not
ridiculous.
Right.
It is.
It's just not right.
There's many musicians who support cannabis reform. I think we're all familiar with Sting. Sting is an advocate. Melissa Etheridge, who used cannabis when she was battling cancer.
Right.
Jack Black, who was actually on the advisory board for the Marijuana Policy Project.
Mm-hmm. I love him.
Michelle Phillips from the Mamas and Papas. I mean, she's been at this since the 60s. Alanis Morissette. She says, as an artist, there's a sweet jumpstart quality to marijuana for me.
Yeah.
See, so she said when she writes a song and she comes back and looks at it and, smokes a little, comes back, looks at it, she has a whole new fresh look of it.
True.
I think John Mayer's a big advocate. I think John Mayer just seems like a guy who played guitar and liked to get stoned. And then
really.
he just became super famous and he's still the same.
Still the same guy who likes to get stoned and play guitar.
Right. He's just still the same guy,
On tour with the Grateful Dead even.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Miley Cyrus is a big advocate, although, she was big into it when she was like in her college age, but I hear that she's stopped smoking, but it's still an advocate. Well, when she was about that age.
She was probably doing bongers when she was on Nickelodeon.
Yeah, probably.
Disney or
Justin Timberlake is another big one. He said sometimes.
Really? I didn't know that.
He goes, I absolutely smoke. He goes, sometimes I need to smoke just to stop thinking. He goes, sometimes I have a brain that needs to be turned off.
Yes.
So it helps him obviously with stress and or anxiety or just being able to relax.
Cool.
Sure.
Even the boy band guys, huh?
Yeah.
Tony Bennett, after Whitney Houston died, he came out and said, I'd like to have every gentleman and lady in this room commit to themselves to get our government to legalize drugs.
No way.
So they can get it through the doctor, not from some gangster who sells it under the table.
Well said.
Which is a very good
Does
point.
he smoke weed?
It doesn't say that he did. I don't know for
Isn't
sure.
he like 90? Wow.
But regardless, he's an advocate.
Right, and that's Tony Bennett. Come on.
Yeah.
Paul McCartney said when they asked him if he smoked pot, he goes, back in the day, because I did a lot. Because I don't smoke it anymore because he said, and I quote, I've smoked my share.
I bet he did.
I don't think he quit. I think I read he didn't quit smoking weed till he was like 70 or 65 or something.
Yeah, he doesn't smoke pot anymore. Now he just eats it. He vapes it. John Legend is another big one. Now, one of the people I really admire, I think who's a musician's musician, is Carlos Santana.
Mm-hmm.
But he's been an advocate since the 60s. And he said, bring our brothers home and sisters home from war. Now legalize marijuana and take all that money and invest it in teachers and education.
Wow, he was ahead of his time.
Transformation in America.
Cool. And I'm sure that's just the top of the iceberg as far as musicians go.
Well, there's two more. One is Madonna was a big advocate for smoking pot. Apparently, she liked to smoke weed. Mm-hmm. Apparently, before she went on talk shows, asked David Letterman on that one. But really? The big surprising to me was here's a huge super megastar. Mm-hmm. And back in the 70s, she was huge. And apparently, and we're talking about the one and only Babs, Barbra Streisand.
What?
No
and apparently, she would smoke pot on stage.
Get out of
Oh my God!
And she tells the story how she smoked weed with Peter Sellers, and they decided how great it would be to have steak flavored ice cream.
Well, we could see where that went. Yeah, I think both Ben and Jerry nixed that one, but okay. So we have a little bit more news in addition to the Facebook item. Let's start with Andrew. What have you got this week?
Well, I got an interesting story. It turns out the California Bureau of Cannabis Control is updating their regulations for the retail cannabis industry in California, which recently just started. Now, what they're doing, they are asking citizens for their input. They want to know, what are your views on the retail cannabis industry in California? One of the big issues, I believe, is delivery, because not everyone lives close by it. And especially if you're a patient, you can't get to the dispensary. This will allow anyone in the state of California to have cannabis delivered to them.
No kidding.
So if you live in California, or even if you're just interested in it, you visit the state's website and follow the links to the page where you can offer your insight and read up on the updates.
Can I get them to deliver it to me here in Maryland?
but this feedback, the California government is only the California Bureau of Cannabis Control is only taking comments until 5:00 Monday, August 27th. Oh. So a lot of you might be hearing this after that, but that doesn't mean that in your state that they're not working on legislation and working on regulations, that you can't give your input. And I think a lot of politicians would happily listen to your input, and it could have an effect on the long-term retail cannabis in your state.
Oh, I think so. And I think this kind of points out that there are so many aspects of this beyond just to criminalize or not to criminalize. You know, once you decriminalize, once you legalize, there's a whole slew of things to consider. And this is one of them.
Right. And it's great to see them bringing in the public to, I mean, that's what government's supposed to do.
We just got to keep these regulations reasonable. Got to make sure that small businesses and minorities are able to get in.
Excellent. Jay?
Yeah, I've got a story here that's important. This article is by Tom Angel. He's the founder and chairman of the Marijuana Majority, and he writes for Forbes and different magazines, but he's got a great website, great information. Look him up. He's one of the best around in terms of information on legalization. His name.
What's that website?
It's themarijuanamajority.com. Look him up on Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn. Okay. If you just search him, TOMANGELL. Okay, so this is from the Forbes.com website. So here's a story. Wells Fargo closes Florida politician's account due to marijuana donations. So Wells Fargo, one of the largest banks in the country, has closed the account of a Florida Agriculture Commissioner candidate, Nikki Fried, because she took donations from medical marijuana industry advocates.
Okay.
Which is crazy. It's ridiculous.
Well, I don't think it sounds like it's Wells Fargo doesn't have any particular problem with cannabis. It's the federal law.
It's the federal law.
And they have to protect themselves.
Right. Their lawyers are telling them, guys, this is too sketchy. We could face all kinds of problems down the road with this. So
that's right.
One of the most popular cannabis businesses on LinkedIn I've found is consultants. And most of what they do is help legal businesses where cannabis is legal in legal states dance through the frickin' bureaucracy of the government and avoid the federal government. Because, I mean, I've heard people say to go lease space for a grow operation somewhere in a legal state, it can cost 2 to 3 times as much to lease a space than it would if you were putting a frickin' store or a warehouse in there, because of the risk that the real estate people feel like they're taking. They don't know. The federal government could come in any time and shut them down. You know?
That's right.
That's why that's why this is so important that we get the federal law changed.
So we are adding a new dynamic to Vote Pro podcast now in the form of an interview. We're going to interview a fourth party here, something that we hope to continue to do as we go along, and no pressure, AD, but depending on how well this one goes. And and so I would like to introduce an old friend of ours who is currently on tour with the band Louis Prima Jr. and The Witness. And you may all remember Louis Prima from the 50s and 60s. Well, this is Louis Prima Jr., and it's an amazing big band sound. And with us today is their drummer, our good friend, A.D. Adams. How are you, A.D.?
I'm great, you guys. How are you, man? It's been a long time. Good to see
Been
you.
a little while. So how's life on the road, man?
It's good, man. It's good. It's, it's kind of the thing I've always wanted to do, and they always be careful what you wish for. You just may get it. So here I am. I'm in Nashville right now, and got a night off, which is rare and nice, actually.
Right.
So, yeah, good to be here with you guys.
Well, this is episode 7 of Vote Pro Podcast. Now you're doing a podcast of your own too. What's the name of that?
It's the Shabby Road Record Show. It's shabby like shitty and like Abbey Road. We do it out of my studio in Phoenix, Shabby Road Studio, and it's myself and my buddy Ryan McKay, who's actually the guitar player in Louis Prima's band. So we go way back. We had Ryan and I did together we did 5 albums with a band called Crash Street Kids. We did that.
Great band.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks. That was a fun thing, kind of a throwback David Bowie, Motley Crue, Slade kind of concept. So we used to, when we were forming that band, we would sit down at my studio and just have a few drinks and whatever, and we would just say, we would laugh and joke about, hey, let's just write a song that would have been on Kiss's Dressed to Kill album.
Oh, that's cool.
And we'd laugh and then all of a sudden we're writing it and recording it, and we had no idea that we'd ever put it out, but it turned out that way. So those little sessions turned into our podcast. Ultimately, it's like, hey, let's sit down in the studio and spin some vinyl, and then let's do a podcast. So it started there.
Well, I'll tell you this: AD is a encyclopedia of rock and roll. I'm blown away, man. When I listen to Shabby, I love that podcast. When I listen to it, that dude knows everything about everybody. It's great.
All right, if you are a connoisseur of rock and roll, especially rock and roll trivia, you have to check out Shabby Road. Say it again.
Shabby Road Record Show.
We'll put a link. We'll put a link in the show description so you can get to it.
Yeah. The whole concept of the show is we spin. It's all vinyl. It has to be vinyl. And it has to be a personal collection. So I think between us, we've got quite a few thousand albums sitting on our shelf. So we come equipped with what we call a mystery box, and in each guy's mystery box, we have 3 albums. And we pick a selection from each of those 3 albums and talk about the record, the band, the producer, whatever, any personal experiences we may have with that actor, what have you. So it's fun. It's a blast. We have a lot of celebrity, our little rock star friends coming on and doing, interviews and guest hosting and stuff like that. So it's been a blast. We've been doing it for about 3 going on 4 years now.
One of the things that's so fun about this show is it's like reading liner notes when you listen to the music. Because these guys fill you in on, you know what I mean? Who played on what and who produced it. It's great, man.
Right. So we again are in episode 7, and it's all about cannabis and the musician. And we're just kind of interested to know your perspective on this, or more your experience about the on the road phenomenon vis-a-vis the weed phenomenon.
Right.
So for example, what is the dynamic on the road with Louis Prima Jr. and the Witness regarding weed? Is it prevalent? Is it kind of out in the open? Is it more of a keep to yourself kind of situation?
Well, it's definitely different from back in the day, in the 80s, 70s, 80s, when I was touring as a younger artist, younger musician. I mean, back then you'd roll up your bag of weed and stuff it in a suitcase and hope you don't get pulled over on the Jersey Turnpike. But it's still one of those things where, we're crossing state lines in the tour bus so often, and a lot of times flying to gigs. So that makes carrying it with you a little bit more difficult. That's one that, just because you never know where you're going to end up, where the tour is going to take you, and what little mishaps can happen on the road. I still am reluctant to bring it with me on the road like we used to do before. Before we didn't care if we got pulled over, busted, whatever, but it's easy to find. I mean, I think people, it's almost like it takes one to know one thing. And when we go on the road, I've had many people walk up to me and go, "The guy in the band that smokes weed." I'm like, good call.
Right.
But don't you see that there's some states you go to where you can just go down to the dispensary and buy it?
Absolutely. Colorado is one of them, and it's wonderful. I was on the road when I'm not touring with with Louis Prima. I tour with a band that goes down to Mexico and up into Colorado and the southwestern region. We were, we had a couple dubs with us, and we were driving from Arizona up to Colorado. It was amazing. Once we crossed over into Colorado, the first thing that DL said, he goes, "Safe now, don't you?" He goes, "You're breathing easier now." It was amazing.
Yeah.
Crossing that state line into Colorado. It's like, yeah, man, this is freaking cool. We can't get busted here. It was like, man, you feel safe. They bust you here. And it was, the feeling was pretty cool. It was one of those things, I first time I smoked weed, 11 years old at a Humble Pie concert. And it was King Crimson and Humble Pie.
Wow.
And yeah, man. And, so back then, it was just, you did what you did, you smoke it, and, it was always illegal. It's like, yeah, there will never be legal. It was something that, I still don't have my card, and I could get it in and I'm just like, yeah, when they legalize it, I'll do it. But it's weird, so. But yeah, going into Colorado was a feeling that I'd really never experienced before. It was quite incredible, and it was nice, man. We walked into a store. It's like walking into a Dunkin' Donuts. You go, I want one of those. I want one of those. I'll take one of those.
Yeah. So AD, tell us what your experiences are with weed in terms of when you're comfortable and when you're not. Like we were talking about it early in the show. Do you like to catch a little buzz before you play or after you play?
Sure. Yeah. It's just, I'm more comfortable when I'm buzzed, and I like, we have long bus trips sometimes where, we just drove from Chicago to Nashville today. The bus pulled in about an hour and a half ago.
Wow.
And, that's 8 hours on a bus, and you take a stop at use the bathroom. There's a bathroom on the bus, but no pooping on the bus. So
no, that's a rule.
Yeah, you gotta pull over, and I usually roll little pinners, little pin, and I'll go walk somewhere and just 2-3 puffs, and I'm back on the bus, and no harm, no foul. But I'm reluctant to carry it. I very rarely have it with me. It's not by law, by decree. Louis doesn't mind, but it's just one of those things where I'd rather not put everybody at risk, depending on what state line we cross. You never know what state we might go through from, again, driving from Chicago to Nashville. What states are in between? Are we going to cut the corner of a state where we could really get in trouble? And that's a risk, sadly, still we don't want to take. There's a lot more money at stake than there was back in the day when we just roll up our little bags and stash them in our suitcase and hit the Jersey Turnpike, and
yeah.
And the music is different too. That's got to play a part as well.
The music is definitely different. It's really up-tempo music. We're doing stuff at 300 beats a minute sometimes, and it's got to be super precise. So, when I'm smoking weed, I go the other direction. It kind of chills me out, allows me to get into the music, and I'm better suited for that with the Louis music than when we're writing and doing pre-production, where performance isn't exactly, it doesn't have to be exact. But with the high velocity and energy that we're using, that we perform with on stage, I found that it does slow me down at those tempos. I mean, when you're playing big band swing at 250, 260 plus beats a minute, you got to be spot on. And
I imagine.
And so it's the one thing that by choice before the Louis gigs are the only gigs that I don't puff a little bit, So and only just for self-preservation. I got to be right on top of it, But in the creative process, man, there's nothing better for me. I mean, I'm in my place when we're doing that kind of thing, the creative process of it.
Yeah.
Cool. So everybody's different. What about when you listen to music?
Yeah. There's a certain place, like when I'm listening, I like to get in the headphones, get a little buzz going and really get into the layers of the music. It's easier for me when I'm in that bubble, I can kind of listen to the production and what's happening. It's easier to distinguish what's going on. And I think I understand a lot of times the musical metaphors that are happening too during lead breaks and bridges and things like that.
Do you think it opens up your mind to more things, to you're more accepting? Like I love the Beatles. And I know when I was, younger and getting high and listening to, the Beatles, and you hear the sitar, I'm going, wow, that's kind of neat. Now, if I wasn't stoned, I would probably just thought George didn't know how to tune his banjo.
Yeah, that's so true, though. Yeah,
there's nothing bad about the sitar, but the only time a sitar sounds good is when you place one in an empty dumpster and throw an accordion at it.
Don't candy coat it, Andrew. Tell us how you really feel.
I'm kidding. I'm joking.
Friends in India, one at a time.
I'm joking. But the guitar is a wonderful instrument. Has a rich culture and history.
Losing friends in India and Minnesota.
Have you seen Ravi Shankar's daughter, the one that plays sitar?
Yes.
Holy moly.
Nora Jones is her daughter. Is his
her
daughter.
too, yeah. But she has an older sister that's a sitar virtuoso.
Oh,
and she's gorgeous. Plays her ass off. Great player, man.
No, but like it opens. I know, like I remember when I was a young lad, we would get stoned. We'd buy an album. We'd get high. We'd put on side A, track 1. We'd open up the album, and we'd listen to it and get high and read the liner notes and listen to, like, back then there was concept albums, and you sat and listened to it.
Oh,
In
yeah.
fact, we were talking about this the other day. There used to be FM rock. You didn't see it. I mean, because a lot of people, you bumped into the guys at Steely Dan. Most people wouldn't even know who the hell they are.
Right.
But they were huge success, and they were like the ultimate in that FM studio rock thing.
Yeah.
So
video killed the radio star, man.
The music has changed. It's now more visual. In your travels, do you see a difference in someone's political opinion about cannabis, or in general, is it just their geographic location, or does the style of music sometimes affect their political opinion, do you think?
Boy, that's a great question, really. It's I think it crosses all genres. I think the rock and rollers are more the stoners, but then again, I'm doing big band swing, and that stuff started way back in the early teens, 1910 with Louis Armstrong when he was playing with King Oliver back in the in the 1910s and stuff, and on through. So there's a huge history of weed and jazz. I mean, those old guys up in Harlem, back in the 30s and stuff, like Cab Calloway.
Yeah.
And 35. I mean, he had a song called "The Reefer Man." Like outrageous for 1935. As far back as 1928, I think. Louis Armstrong put out a song called "Muggles."
Yep.
And Muggle is
and that was before Harry Potter.
Yeah, it's a street term for weed.
Yep.
So I mean, they're writing songs literally, with it's write a song today or in the 80s and call it "Smoke Weed," and you wouldn't see the radio, you wouldn't see airplay. So
right.
There's an enormous history in jazz. So they're still out there. Again, I get sought out a lot. It's hey man, which one of you guys gets high, and it's there, which is good, So, but I don't see really much difference in between the genres as far as that goes. Again, I think rock and roll and reggae are sort of more, I guess, maybe associated more with weed, just because of the reggae thing, and the Rastafari and things like that. What
about geographically as you travel? I mean, is there more, and from a political or a legalization standpoint, are they more open to it maybe in the South or up in the Northeast or in the West Coast?
Definitely West Coast, definitely, especially upper Northwest,
Okay.
Seattle area, Portland area, things like that, Northern California, Monterey area, San Francisco, those, so the West Coast certainly. And then again, I mentioned Colorado earlier. So that's a big, it's wide open there. I mean, literally you can finish your set and literally walk onto the balcony or wherever, the porch of wherever you're playing, and go right on the street. And have
that's it. I'm going.
Yeah, right. It's pretty cool, man. Like I said, it's the weirdest feeling. It's like, wait a minute, I can't get in trouble for this. That's weird. I almost don't want to do it anymore. Yeah.
Takes all the fun out of it, man.
Yeah, right. Bullshit.
Yeah.
When you're crossing the country and you're going through predominantly red states, do you still see some people really so pro weed? Because when we're talking about music and weed, I mean, Willie Nelson is the first person you should talk about.
Right.
But when Willie did Farm Aid, he won the hearts of the red states. And Willie has always been outspoken about weed, and I think he did a lot to get the middle America and the more conservative people to go, weed's not all that bad if Willie does it.
Yeah, I think you're
Willie
right.
does it, yeah.
True. I mean, he was an iconic musical figure, obviously thrown in with the Waylon Jennings and the Johnny Cashes back
Outlaws,
in the 70s, the outlaw country.
And those guys smoke weed.
All of them.
Sure.
Yeah.
All those guys.
Willie said in an interview that all his friends were dead. A lot of them because they didn't smoke weed. They drank themselves to death. Here he is, 85 years old, because that's his preference, Yeah. As far as dragging, I don't want to say dragging, but pulling the red states and more of the
right-wing voters in, he was monumental. I mean, to the point of, when you think of country music, you tend to think more of middle America. You tend to think more of conservative,
America and apple pie.
Sure. And then, with the whole Willie thing, was it Toby Keith? Just flag waving, conservative, in that genre. What's that song he put out? I'll never smoke with
Willie again. Yeah,
right.
And that kind of opened a door in a weird way. That became an iconic, almost novelty song in a way. But it brought everybody a little closer to realizing that, hey, it's not so bad, and the people doing it aren't horrible people. It's not a bunch of Charles Mansons going to smoke their weed and go out on a killing spree. And I think that all those little
you're right,
things along the way had a lot to do with accepting it in a red state. I live in Arizona, which has been a notoriously red state. It's becoming quickly more purple, I guess is the way to put it.
Yeah. Well, you're not exactly a progressive leftist yourself.
No, it is not. No, personally, no. But the thing is, it's already now available for medicinal purposes in Arizona. And when it came up in the ballot, I'm like, there's no way.
No way.
Yeah. Right. I mean, just forget it. Of course, I put my little check mark in the box for it, but and lo and behold, Arizona is now a medicinal state. I'm like, well, okay, there's a step.
A lot of retirees. I wonder if that had a lot to do with it.
You know what? Honestly, I bet it did. Those
I bet it did.
Are a handful, man.
Because Andrew, what did you say? The teen drug use in Colorado has gone down, but among the baby boomers and the elderly.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, teen use stayed level or went down a little bit. Matter of fact, Colorado has below the national average of teen use, but use amongst people 65 and older went up 300%.
Well, if you think, let's hear from the old people.
Yeah, man.
They're replacing pharmaceuticals with cannabis.
Right.
Well, yeah. And part of that, too, is just simply the demographic got older. The hippies got old.
That's right.
Like
us.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think cannabis affects everybody differently. They say that cannabis affects the way you perceive time. And so when you're just counting all the time, you can somehow see the rhythmic patterns and get fit more in a measure tastefully than you could when you're not under the influence. So that's some people's theory.
Yeah. And part of it too is, like I said earlier, was about, kind of the way I listen to music when I've smoked a little bit, and so it's funny. I'll, on a live performance when everything's moving, I'll find myself kind of closing my eyes and I'm still playing, but all of a sudden I'm listening to the damn horn section more than I thought. I'm going, those guys are firing tonight, man. And I was, oh shit, I missed that cue.
Yeah.
By the way, the horn section, Louis Prima's band
is primo.
They blow the friggin' doors off rooms.
Well, AD, thanks so much, man, for being a part of this, being our inaugural interviewee. It was extremely fun and informative, and just to get a flavor for what the scene is on the road with you guys is pretty cool. And like Jay said, we're awfully proud of you. So
thanks. Thanks for having me on. It's been a blast talking to you guys. It's been forever, man. Get all three of you together. This has been a treat for me.
It's nice to catch up, buddy.
Well, we sure do appreciate AD. That was AD Adams, our longtime friend and very successful musician, and we're very grateful for his participation in today's show. And as always, we would love to hear from you. We're pushing hard for change, and we need your input. So please visit us at www.VoteProPot.com. Check out all our episodes, and please leave us a comment.
If you want to send us an email, VoteProPot@gmail.com.
And please like and follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/VoteProPot.
Wish I was up in Vancouver at the Cannabis Cafe, smoking good old Sensimilla at the beginning of the day. But here I am in New York City, hiding out in Central Park, getting cute kidnapped by the police. Today, sometime before dark. But I wish I was up in Vancouver at the Cannabis Cafe, smoking good old sense media at the beginning of the day. The judge looked down upon me, frowned. He said, kid, get on your way. Just don't start out your morning with espresso and a J. I said, I wish I was up in Vancouver at the Cannabis Cafe, smoking good old sense media at the beginning of the day. Hitched on out to Portland, caught a ride up to BC, took the bus over to the neighborhood to have a bowl with my coffee. Now I'm up in Vancouver at the Cannabis Cafe, smoking good old sense media at the beginning of the day. Smoking good old sense media